First, I'm going to have Kimberley Ellis come on up.
Kimberley Ellis.
My kids are always with me. And then I'm going to have Daraka come up, if you don't mind. And before we get started, I'm going to ask the candidates, and this is impromptu, they didn't know I was going to do this, to introduce themselves, take about 30 seconds, tell us why you're running, what you stand for, and then we'll move into the forum.
My name is Daraka Larimore-Hall. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a lifelong grassroots activist in both the labor movement and the Democratic Party with 15 years of experience in building the California Democratic Party at the grassroots level. I'm running because I love this party. I want it to be stronger, more accessible, more democratic, and more effective. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Kimberley Ellis. Many of you may remember me from 2 years ago when I ran to be the chair of our party. That campaign was a campaign that really talked about being a party of the people, by the people, for the people. It talked about getting this party back to basics by rerouting and regrounding this party in people. Today I'm running to bring substance, style, and solidarity to our party. I'm running for this party to connect the dots as to how politics touches every single aspect of their lives, and I'm running to make this party relevant again to people's everyday lives. I look forward to being in conversation and community today and over the next several weeks. Good evening.
All right, so I realize the irony of this question as the white woman sort of up here in my city, which you're a white woman, right? Aliso Viejo is a wonderful city. We do need to work on some of our diversity, and so this question is going to be on that topic. And that is, what steps will you and your campaign staff do to engage diverse populations in the political process? And if you could, since we are in Aliso Viejo, Orange County, if you could mention anything specific about Orange County, I would really appreciate it. Kimberley, why don't you start?
For almost the last 10 years, I've worked for an organization called Emerge California. It recruits and trains Democratic women to run for office. You have several graduates here in Orange County who have gone through the program and been elected, including Farrah Khan, who was recently elected. And when I took over that organization in 2010, it really was a regional program that serviced about 7 or 8 counties in the Bay Area. Under my leadership in the 7 years there, we expanded to be a statewide organization servicing 3 regions, the Bay Area, Southern California, and last year they opened a program in the Central Valley. Under my leadership, the percentage of women of color who went through the program went from 39% to 56%. So the graduates of Emerge California actually look like the beautiful diversity that is California. You know, last time around I talked a lot about this party being a party that didn't just talk about its values, but a party that lived its values. I talked about being a party that really was inclusive of historically underrepresented and disadvantaged communities. And so for me, I think it's high time this party stop talking about it and start being about it with respect to diversity. What you can expect from me as your next chair is fully 50% of my administration will be women, because women are 50% of this population. And you can expect that the majority of my administration will be people of color, because we live in a state that is majority people of color. You can expect that I will require that all of our standing committees and caucuses also have leadership that reflect California, i.e. people of color. And so I am a person that believes in fewer words and more actions. I believe that it is time for this party to not just talk the talk, but to walk the walk. And so what you can expect from me is a chair who will ensure that every single aspect of this party looks like California.
Thank you. So I hear you, you're going to have minorities, or you're going to have minimum requirements in terms of your cabinet and who's going to be on there. But what specifically are you going to do to encourage minorities to get involved with the democratic process?
Well, first and foremost, we're going to stop playing the hide the ball game. What I mean by that is I was talking with some folks talking about the ADEM elections and how there are so few people who actually live in California who even know about the ADEM elections. Unfortunately, there are many ways in which the Democratic Party isn't very democratic. And so, first and foremost, we need to be a party that believes in educating our citizenry, a party that really believes in stepping back and welcoming in all of the diversity that is in California. So I want to ensure that we are doing what we need to do to roll up our sleeves to meet people where they're at. Going into those communities is actually how we diversified the alum who came through Emerge California. It's going into those communities, not expecting those communities to find us and to come to us. And so ensuring, what I will do is ensure that we are spending time, money, resources, dedicating real people to actually going into the communities of underrepresented, underserved communities of color and asking them to take part in this party, asking them to be on our committees, asking them to be a part of our caucus, asking them to be a part of this party which claims the mantle of being the party of diversity. It's time for us to live up to that, not just in talk, but in action.
Daraka, what's your take? What would you do differently than what Kimberley has just described?
Well, first of all, I just want to highlight a little bit about my record as it applies to concrete victories in breaking white supremacy and breaking barriers to electing more people of color to office. So I come from a place called Santa Barbara. You've probably heard of it. And when you think of Santa Barbara, you probably think of that old TV show where its reputation is being a playground for the rich. Santa Barbara, the public schools in Santa Barbara are over 47% Latino. The median income in the city of Santa Barbara is about the same, a little bit higher than that of Ventura. You wouldn't know that, right? But we have an increasingly struggling and pinched, predominantly Latino working class in the city of Santa Barbara and in the county that are underrepresented, underempowered, and exploited. Spending 10 years as a county chair in Santa Barbara, I made it one of my #1 priorities to push back on that reality, to fight that reality. Just this last election cycle, I was really, really proud of the fact when you picked up our door hanger, our local door hanger for the Santa Barbara County Democratic Party, there was like only one white dude on the entire door hanger. And that's both because of the tremendous work that's been done statewide to make sure that the folks that are running on our behalf at the state level are a lot more representative of the state, but it was also the work that we've done locally. In fact, one of the things as a county chair that you have to do, right, is when the party's made an endorsement, try to encourage other people not to split the vote and not to run against those people. I had to sit down with so many white men over the last 10 years and explain that our party is endorsing a young person of color, a woman of color, a woman, and we're not endorsing you, dude, so you just gotta sit down. I have the experience in actually having those kinds of tough conversations to make sure that we are both putting forward and supporting and electing a cadre of elected officials in the state that actually reflects who we are. That's the kind of leadership that I will continue as chair of this party. The second thing I would say that I think we always have to be careful of is, and I say this as a person of color who's done a lot of work in my life as a person of color in a predominantly white organization, which isn't always the easiest thing. And one of the things that happens a lot is that we get into what I call the Noah's Ark mentality. The Noah's Ark mentality is when folks look around the room and they feel bad because it's not as representative as they'd like it to be. So they're tasked with then going out and finding 2 black folks and 2 Latinos and 2 lesbian folks, right? And let's get everybody 2 by 2 into the ark. The problem is, communities of color are in action all over this state. They're not sitting around waiting to be invited to our ark, right? They're building their own. They're challenging racist laws that privilege white voters. They're suing cities in order to go to district elections. they're mobilizing in their community to protect people against police violence. What I would do as chair, first and foremost, is to work in coalition with those organizations, to sit at those tables, and to show that the Democratic Party is a space that values those issues, that prioritizes those issues. My experience as a community organizer, a student organizer, and a labor organizer is always that the first thing an organization needs to do is be there on the issues for communities of color. And then communities of color will see us as a partner, and people will get more involved. So that's the approach that I would take.
So Aliso Viejo is a wonderful city. All come down here, buy a house, move down here, send your kids to some local schools. We are, however, the city where the Minutemen were founded. That's a problem. But when I look around, and in particular, we have a candidate running for Aliso Viejo City Council in 2020, Richard Hurt. Richard, you stand up. First of all, I want to see you all canvassing for him. Second of all, Daraka, what words of wisdom would you give Richard running in this predominantly white neighborhood?
We talked about out at the reception ahead of time, or before, is traveling around this state and talking to people who have done the beautiful, wonderful, and really kind of cocked thing of putting their name out to run for office. Thank you very much. I think everyone's room has done this, done that. But I've talked to people running all over this state who were never told, didn't know about, somehow missed all of the resources and tools that are entitled to them, that they're entitled to rather, as endorsed candidates of this party. What that really spoke to me is that we're not doing a very good job of taking advantage of the high-profile, really expensive, really exciting races for things like Congress or legislature, and building the kind of coordinated campaigns that we've done in Santa Barbara so well that spreads that love, that energy, and that attention all the way down the ticket. So my first piece of advice is to get in and throw elbows and demand the things as a Democratic candidate that you're entitled to from the party, work with the other leaders, work with the clubs to get your due. In terms of the racial politics of things, one of the things that I think our community, the Black community in California in particular, has to increase our skill set on, and sort of go back to our original skill set as the original coalition builders in progressive politics in this country, is that the numbers aren't on our side. The demographics are not on the side of Black people in the state. If the demographic trends continue the way that they are, and we're reliant on having majority Black districts or plurality Black districts to elect Black people, we're not going to have any Black elected officials in the state. We have to be coalition building. We have to be working with other groups of people that we have something in common with, we have solidarity with, work with those people, be the coalition candidate. So be the coalition candidate and take advantage of the resources and the economies of scale. That is the whole purpose of having a political party, right? So that you can come in, plug your campaign into the campaign that's going to be energized by beating the fascists in the White House, by holding on to these seats, these hard-won seats that we've won in Orange County. You want to plug into that, take advantage of that energy, and ride that wave.
Perfect, thank you. All right, I've got a couple more questions, but I'm going to take one from the floor. Does anybody have a question?
It has to be a delegate, from a delegate.
So back here.
Yes. Diana?
Thank you. I'm Diana Frieden, and I am a delegate from AD 74. It has been my pleasure to be an AD Dem for 10 years. Anyway, this question is for Daraka. Daraka, I have had the pleasure of seeing you grow up in the party. I remember when you ran for secretary, your speech rocked the convention. You have intellect, you have charisma. I don't understand how you voted for Derek Bellman. Perhaps you can explain, as well as there is an impending lawsuit that is going on, and I'm wondering how you might have the bandwidth to deal with the lawsuit as well as the various jobs of chair if you were elected.
So in terms of the vote, I would think that if there are folks in the room that have voted more than a few times, we all have votes that we regret. Mine are voting for Eric Bauman, and also my choice for president a few cycles ago. But I was absolutely convinced that this son of a mill worker from North Carolina was going to be the best presidential candidate. Little did I know he was having like an illicit love child in Santa Barbara while I was out canvassing for him. So we made mistakes. I voted, I didn't endorse in the chair's race because I had a lot of very, very good friends and supporters on both sides of that race. I actually considered running myself in that race, but decided since I had friends that were already committed, that really didn't make sense. And I voted for Eric because I thought that, and I still believe that experience in the party and understanding how the party works is very, very important. My experience with him was that though it was full of problems, he could be pushed to do the right thing. That had been my experience with him, and that was the calculation that I made in voting for chair, that he would be able to be influenced to do good things for the party, to build the party. So, and I regret it. In terms of the lawsuit, there's a whole bunch of sort of impending legal questions and legal issues that are going to face the party, not only because of Eric Bauman's abuse, but also because of acting chair Rooker's decision to fire a bunch of senior staff right after Bauman's resignation. So there are a lot of aggrieved parties. I do believe I have the bandwidth to lead the party through that process. I've been preparing for all of the other work of this job as a volunteer, pretty much sun up to sundown now for 15 years, and I'm ready to get to work.
Kimberley, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so I want to go back to the advice for our young future city council member. I first want to thank you for running. Thank you for running. As someone who has trained hundreds of women to run for office, I know that running for office is probably one of the hardest things a person can do, so I thank you for that. Second, I want to say, be your authentic self. There are a lot of people, including consultants, who will try to make you into something you are not. They can't come close to the person who you are, and so I want to encourage you to stay true to who you are, stay fixed on your North Star, and be your authentic self. Third, I want to say, remember to lift as you climb. And what I mean by that is don't forget to reach back and pull people up, not when you get into that seat, but every step along the way. It's important that we create a different culture in politics to really lift as we climb, to have a mentor and to also be a mentor to others. I think it's important that when you're running for office, you should listen more and talk less.
That's right.
This is about service. This is about listening to your community, to what they need for you as their elected representative. I want to encourage you to remember that it is a privilege to serve. To lead by example with your actions rather than your words. And to remember that elections are never about the candidate. Oftentimes, our culture that we live in today and consultants try to make elections about a candidate. But I want to remind you that elections are never about candidate. Elections are always, always, always about the voters. And more specifically, they're about the mood of the electorate at any given moment in time. So I want to encourage you to dig deep, to roll up your sleeves, to really understand what's going on in your electorate, so that you can be the best representative when you get to your seat as city council member. Yeah. And then I want to answer the question about Daraka voting for Eric because he believed that he had experience in the party. The reason we are having a special election today is because we have a culture problem in our party. so let's just talk very honestly about what experience in the party has too often meant. Experience in the party has too often meant abuse, bullying, harassing, and threatening. The number one priority under my administration will be addressing very squarely and very directly the culture problem that we have within the California Democratic Party. Because the truth of the matter is, what we saw with Eric was not an anomaly, and it was not something that just started happening. It is something that had been going on for years. And unfortunately, that same kind of behavior has been going on at the local level for years. For far too long, we have had too many elected officials turn a blind eye. I want to remind people that the victims who suffered abuse were somebody's children. We need to understand that this kind of abuse has been happening in the name of our Democratic Party. And so first and foremost, I think it's important that we not dance or skirt around the issue that our party has been served with a lawsuit. And I can tell you, based on talking with several attorneys, there are at least 3 to 5 additional lawsuits that will be hitting our party over the next coming weeks. There are real legal and financial implications to our party. So first and foremost, dealing with the abusive culture that has been allowed to perpetuate is really important. I plan to really set the tone at the top, because this kind of culture change really needs a leader who will set the tone, the tenor, and the direction for how this party will operate, for what the expected behavior is, not just as Democrats, not just as Californians, but as human beings. If we have any hope of winning back the White House in 2020, which I'm sure everyone in this room is in agreement we must do, it is critically important that we be able to distinguish very clearly who we are, what we stand for, what we're about, as it relates to the person that currently occupies the White House. And as of right now, the kind of culture we have created in the largest, most powerful, most influential state party in the country does not leave a lot of difference. And so, first and foremost, as the chair of your party, you can expect me to clean house with respect to that. Ensuring that our values as Democrats are in alignment not just with our talk, but with our walk. It's important that we create a party that is diverse and inclusive, but also a party that is safe for our babies and our children and anyone who wants to participate to come to.
Thank you. One thing you said really stuck out to me, that we're going to take a financial hit with all of these scandals. As having been a candidate before, I know that that's true, and I'm going to switch it a little bit now to financial issues. A lot of criticism has come up about Democrats taking large donations from a very small group of wealthy donors. I'm curious as to both of you, what your plans are in terms of what your goal would be in terms of getting people to donate at intervals of $100 or less. How are you going to get those people to donate, and what percentage of our party's money would you like to see coming from that? And we started with Kimberley last, so I think I'll start with, did we start? I'm going to start with you. I'm going to go with it.
So we've been talking out of both sides of our mouths as a party about campaign finance for far too long. Like, on the one hand, we say money in politics is bad, but we kind of imply that it's really only bad when Republicans take money, and it's okay when we do it, trust us, etc., right? So, the activists in this party have secured several victories over the last few years, right? Getting the party to forswear taking money from oil companies, taking money from private prison companies, taking money from charter school companies, taking money from tobacco companies. That is a great start. And if you look at the party's finances, and the money that comes into the party, right, the biggest chunk by far is from our sisters and brothers in the labor movement. The next biggest chunk is from candidates, right? It's from candidate campaigns, politicians. And then you've got corporate money. It's actually not a huge part of the direct contributions, but we should zero that out. And we should make a plan to replace all of the corporate contributions that come into the party with small dollar contributions, with grassroots fundraising, and have benchmarks to meet that over the next 2 years, right? We can't unilaterally disarm, right? Beating every Republican, every chance we get is a moral obligation that we have, especially as the party moves closer and closer to the far right. So we can't afford to just throw up our hands and say, okay, we'll just lose elections. At the same time, we absolutely know that good field operations, good grassroots operations, and good candidates can beat big money. So we've got to redouble our efforts to take the great work that was done in the DEM 2016, 2018, 2020 program, the small dollar program, and we really need to empower our clubs and our central committees to get involved in that program and turn every single one of our activists into grassroots fundraisers. That's the only way that we're going to generate enough money. I don't want to see us just replace one group of wealthy donors with another group of wealthy donors. I want us to replace that money that has strings attached with money that comes from our base, that comes from our activists who want to invest in our values and invest in our program. But there's a whole other set of problems, which is the fact that, yeah, the Democratic Party cannot take money from oil companies, but the oil companies just back their dump trucks full of money up to candidates who will take it. And then we see we see representatives from safe Democratic districts voting with oil companies instead of their constituents. That's a problem, right? So the other thing we need to do is to take the few kinds of campaign finance reforms that actually have withstood legal scrutiny, because as you know, we have a Supreme Court that thinks that dollars are free speech, and have struck down all of the most ambitious attempts at campaign finance reform. But there are some that have survived. Here, down in San Diego, there are things that have survived at the county level and at the state level around the country. We need to be a grassroots force, a united force, to pass those kinds of reforms at the city, county, and state level to level the playing field for our Democratic candidates. So to me, it's a 1-2 punch of zeroing out over the next couple of years all the corporate money that comes directly into the party, and then pushing back on that money that goes directly to candidates, which frankly to me is far more dangerous and destructive, because it's special interest giving money directly to the people who vote on their issues. To at least do what we can to move the ball forward in California, even though at the federal level, things aren't looking really good for the next several years for significant reform on campaign finance. Thank you.
So, Daraka, I'm going to push back a little bit. When I started to run, when I decided to run, I met with a bunch of people in the Democratic Party of Orange County. And the first thing every single person told me was that we have no money for local candidates. That needs to be fixed. How are you going to fix it?
So the model that we built in Santa Barbara, we also don't make donations directly to candidates. We don't want to just be a pot of money that we give checks to candidates. What we did instead was build a crackerjack field operation. So that if you're running for school board or city council anywhere in Santa Barbara County, and you go and recruit some volunteers, you can bring them into a fully functioning phone bank with predictive dialers. And as long as you're also making voter IDs on some of our top ticket stuff, you talk about yourself, you promote yourself. That to me is the infrastructure that levels the playing field. So I think that party building is a very particular set of projects. It's not the same thing as candidate recruitment. It's not the same thing as just electing more people with a D next to their name. It's about building the kind of organization that simultaneously elects people and can hold them accountable once they're in office. So to me, it's not about raising money to give more money to central committees for them to write checks to candidates. It's about candidates having to go to the party to get an endorsement based on their values and their sweat equity. That party having a really great operation that can put them in office even if they're not independently wealthy or don't come from the right side of the tracks or don't have a personal database full of country club folks. Regular people can come and plug into that. But the beauty of that system is when those politicians then are in office, and they're voting, and they're building up a record, and they come back to that party and say, hey, I'm running again, I'd like to be endorsed. That gives us an opportunity to look at how they've done, to see if they've stood with us, to hold them accountable. So to me, the model that we've built in politics of checks flowing around, of just like money-based, whoever can raise the most money then gets more money from the power brokers, that's a broken system. And the system that I want is a strong, grassroots, values-driven, progressive party in every community that regular folks can come to get the resources they need to go and represent us in office. And regular people can use as a platform to hold those people accountable. That's party building. And I'm the candidate in this race that's done that at the local level for a decade.
Kimberly, how about you? How are you going to bring in more small dollar donations? What's your goal in terms of that? And how are you going to help local candidates?
So let me see if I can synthesize what Daraka said. I think basically what he's saying is you need a finance and fundraising plan. The number one job for the chair of the California Democratic Party is raising money. It's raising the operational and programmatic budget for the party. If you are not able to raise money, you should not be running for this position. During my last campaign, we raised over $600,000. This campaign so far, we've raised $350,000. More than 6,000 donors combined. Not one nickel of that came from corporations. Not one nickel came from big pharma, oil, tobacco, charter schools, private prison industry, not one nickel. What that should demonstrate to you is that there are thousands and thousands of people who want to invest in a party they believe in. There are many people out there who want to give and invest in this party, but we have to give them a party worth investing in. One of the things that we really need to remember is that in order to diversify our revenue streams, the party really needs to have a development department. While I was at Emerge California under my 7-year tenure, we quadrupled the budget. That means having a development plan that accounts for events, online fundraising, and raising money from major donor investors, people who want to invest in the institution and the programming that comes through the institution. So I think it's really easy to talk about these kinds of programs in theory, but I have a track record of actually raising the kinds of money it is going to take to A, keep the lights on, and B, diversify our revenue streams enough so that we can start moving away from having the kind of donors to fund this party that we all want. I think it's really important, especially these days, that people are very comfortable with the kinds of monies that are funding and supporting our party. And I'm incredibly proud of the more than 6,000 donors who supported our campaign, only 3 of which, by the way, had ever given to the Democratic Party before. And so again, what that demonstrates is that there are people out there who want to invest, but they want to invest in the type of leadership that they can believe in and trust in, and that they want to have a party that they can believe and trust in.
Thank you. I'd like to take another question from the floor, and Annie's walking around. She'll be the one who picks.
Hi everyone. Hi Kimberley. Hi Daraka. My name is Ernell. I'm a delegate for the from this CDP representing the Democratic Party of Orange County Assembly Committee. I'm also city chair of the Filipino caucus. So I think I'm one of the few delegates who's been in the unique position who's actually voted for both of you. I voted for you, Kimberley, last year because I didn't like the tone of the campaigns coming from Chairmam clearly, and I was one of the few who actually voted to endorse you on an Orange County Central Committee. Daraka, you and I have worked together since your secretary campaign, and I definitely respect a lot of what you've done and what you continue to do for the party. And my question is this: when it's multi-part, so bear with me. As far as AB 84 is concerned, I know that actually came up during our meetings during the E-board in Long Beach. How do you see AB 84 and kind of the tone that's been promoted from the electeds in terms of holding them accountable, and if you can explain a little bit about AB 84 for those who don't know? Also, my big concern, and I've discussed with Daraka to some degree, is the tone within the party, especially here in Orange County. There's been issues regarding retaliation because I didn't vote for you, so I'm going to ruin you, and I'm going to make my mission to continue to target you. And I mean, you're the situation that I'm talking about. But how do you want to change that as far as the party is concerned, so that there's not that culture of retaliation, so that we can hold our elected officials accountable for that behavior? How can we do that in light of AB 84? I mean, obviously, one of your votes is in here. So, long story short, how can we hold elected officials accountable, and how can we really bring about the culture change that we both advocate for in the party?
So, on the last campaign, we talked about having the courage to facilitate difficult conversations and to tell hard truths. And the hard truth of the matter is that the party that we have today was not built or intended to support the kind of activism that we have today. That is the truth. This party was not built to be a party that really welcomed and encouraged grassroots activism, that encouraged us holding our elected officials accountable, that encouraged diverse perspectives and voices. It just was not. And so really, the place where we're at right now is at a crossroads within the California Democratic Party. This really is